Welcome to Inside the Castle, the podcast that goes behind castle doors to have real conversations with real people about solving the nation's toughest challenges. I'm one of your hosts today, Angela Fryermuth.
And I'm Lauren Lake. Today we have three guests from the Charleston District, which is celebrating 150 years of service. With us today are Ms. Lisa Matheny, Deputy District Engineer for Programs and Project Management, and Mr. Brian Williams, Acting Chief of Military Construction, as well as the district's Public Affairs Specialist, Mr. Sean McBride, who will be helping out with the interview today. Thank you for joining us here.
Our pleasure to be with you. We love any opportunity we have to get to talk about the Charleston District.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having us. It's a good opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you all. So we always like to start off our episodes by getting to know our guests. Lisa, can you tell us about yourself and your role in the Charleston District? Can you also talk a little bit about Charleston District? Where specifically are you located and your mission within the Corps?
Yes, happy to talk about the district. Just a little bit about me. As the big long title implies, I'm the Deputy District Engineer for Programs and Project Management. Usually I introduce myself as the senior civilian. That seems to translate a little better with the public. And especially since I'm not an engineer by trade, I actually am an economist. My undergraduate degree is in economics, and I have a master's in business administration. So a little bit different from my peers across the Corps. Here, Charleston District is located right in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. We have about 225, 230 employees, and we execute a program of between $300 and $350 million annually. Most of South Carolina is covered by our district, but we also have regional and national customers as well. Even though we're relatively small in the number of employees, we do have all three of the major programs, civil works, military construction, and interagency and international support. So while the civil works is focused mainly on the state of South Carolina, we have regional reimbursable customers all throughout the 9 southeastern states and Puerto Rico, as well as some national customers like Marine Forces Reserves and DLA installation support. For me, how did I end up in this job, not being an engineer? I started with the Huntington District back in June 1st of 1993 as an economics intern. And I was there for 6 years, where I learned all about, at the time we called it flood damage reduction instead of flood risk management, and inland navigation. I came down here to Charleston District in July 1st of 1999, and I've been here pretty much ever since, other than doing a few developmental assignments here and there. So worked my way up from an economist and plan formulator to now, in essence, the chief operating officer for the district. So that's sort of us in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate you providing us with that overview. Brian, can you talk about your role in the district as well?
Yeah, I've been with the Corps for about 18 years, and I started my career with the Corps of Engineers in the New York district as a coastal engineer. Not a lot of coastal engineers in the Corps of Engineers, so it's a relatively small and tight-knit group. And I came to Charleston District in 2005, spent some time in engineering in the Charleston District before transitioning to project management. And Lisa gave me my first shot as a project manager. So really been a great opportunity to be with the Charleston District through some very interesting times and very interesting projects. And I went from being a project manager to transitioning in Lisa's shoes as the Chief of Programs and Civil Works Project Management, and also the Deputy DPM. And I've been doing that since 2014. And then in the past year, I've had some developmental assignments, and right now I am currently the temporary chief of our military PM branch, and really enjoying getting to have that opportunity as well.
Thank you for that overview, Brian. Today we're talking about Charleston celebrating 150 years. And so we would like to learn more about the district, how it started. So Lisa, can you give us some background on the district?
Yes, absolutely. And we are incredibly excited to be celebrating our 150th. We actually had a little bit of debate about is it 150 or 200 years, because the permanent office was established here in 1871, but we had been doing work in the Charleston and South Carolina area for 50 years prior to that. So we've kind of joked that it was a 50-year engagement before we actually got married to Charleston. One of the things the Charleston District is known for from early in our inception here and coming to Charleston was construction of the jetties. And the engineers that worked on that, they really knew what they were doing at the time, because the jetties, we built them from 1882 to 1895, and it was just 2 years ago that the first time we had to do any repairs to it. So we really made our mark in the Charleston area by stabilizing the entrance to the harbor. Throughout the history of the district here in South Carolina, we had a presence in a lot of different places that are now known as Fort Jackson and Fort Moultrie. If you look in the history books in the early 1900s, those were things called Camp Jackson, when literally there weren't any paved roads or anything like that, and you had soldiers living in tents. And now we look at Fort Jackson, and it's one of the primary training bases for new folks that come into the Army. Our history with supporting the Army is very long. We're here in the Low Country part of South Carolina, and so when you think about the Corps of Engineers having the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899, we've been involved with rivers and harbors since that time. We also have a very robust regulatory program because of the presence of all that water here in the area. And over time, we cleared the harbor after the Civil War. Each time the state or the nation called on us to undertake various missions, we took those on with gusto. We built military installations. We built the Atlantic Intercoastal Waterway. We have continued to deepen Charleston Harbor over time. The first deepening took it to 17 feet. And, we've supported a lot of other activities of other members of the federal family, including Department of Energy at Savannah River Site. So we kind of grew from this. We were doing some work here prior to 1871. In 1871, we said, we're going to be here for a while. Let's open an office. And then that office has grown or shrank over time as the nation called on us. So that's sort of the short version of our history.
Thank you, Lisa. And so you talked about the Charleston Harbor briefly. And Brian, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the harbor and its history, and just give us some more background of the project, both the history and where it stands now.
Absolutely, I'd love to. It's tough not to think of Charleston without thinking of kind of our signature civil works project in Charleston Harbor. In the 1700s, the natural depth of Charleston Harbor was approximately 12 feet. Over time, natural shoaling and shifting of the channels created problems both for commercial interest as well as military interest. And that's really where the Corps of Engineers came into play. In fact, Lisa talked about Fort Moultrie. One of the reasons for the Corps being involved in stabilizing and improving Charleston Harbor was that the shifting channel was actually creating erosion to Sullivan's Island, which is on the northeast portion of Charleston Harbor. And that's where Fort Moultrie is situated. And it actually damaged Fort Moultrie through erosion repeatedly. And so really what the Corps got involved with was how to stabilize and improve those navigation channels for both commercial and military interests. The first portion of that northeast jetty to stabilize the channel was started in 1839, and then, as Lisa said, the jetties that we currently know them as came later than that. Another interesting thing about Charleston Harbor and its dredging history is that modern dredging history can be traced to Charleston. So there was a Charleston native. His name was Nathaniel Levy, and he conceived of and built the first suction dredge, which we currently know of as hydraulic dredging. So it's, that's the modern day term for it. But his dredge that he conceived of and built was called the General Moultrie, and it undertook the first hydraulic dredging in Charleston Harbor in 1857. And so the modern dredging history owes its, infancy and its past and its future to what happened here in Charleston. We've been maintaining and, as Lisa said, repeatedly deepening the harbor to benefit commercial and military interests ever since. So to go from 12 feet back in the 1700s took a few different steps to get us to where we are now in deepening the harbor again, time to 50 feet. That project has been really a great success story, both in the planning and the design and the construction. So it's more than $500 million construction project for deepening the harbor, and it's really gone exceedingly well, and that's thanks to the leadership in the Charleston District over the years, and really a testament to our employees. So I'll pause there.
One fun fact I saw when I was looking into that Nathaniel Levy dredge, the General Moultrie is actually listed as the first ever Corps of Engineers dredge as well. So not only, first dredge created here in Charleston and used here in Charleston, but it's labeled as the first Corps of Engineers operated dredge in history. So that's another fun fact on that one.
Awesome. Some really good core history in the Charleston District. Lisa, you mentioned in your intro that in 1917, Charleston District constructed what is now Fort Jackson, and you talked about soldiers coming in. Today, 50,000 incoming soldiers complete basic training there each year. So can you tell us a little bit more about the history with Fort Jackson, please?
Yes, the Corps of Engineers has a very long history with Fort Jackson, and the Charleston District's been part of it, and we've shared that history with Savannah District, our sister district to the south of us. So originally we did the construction, like I said, in 1917, back during World War I times, and there were a lot of military camps built throughout the U.S. At that time, many of which are have been closed and aren't there anymore. Such as the ones that were up around the Myrtle Beach area. But then as the nation went on from World War I and into World War II and then continued on with military service, Fort Jackson grew and changed over time. They've always had a true or a foundational base of bringing in folks in their initial entry into the Army. And so Charleston District's boundaries and missions changed over time. And so Savannah District had the primary responsibility for the mission of supporting Fort Jackson for over 20 years, from the 80s up until 2008. And that's when the mission came back to the district. And at that time, the Army was going through what they call the MILCON transformation, which was really looking differently at how we build the major components on a base, such as dining facilities and how we're laying out barracks and all of those sorts of things. And that was also at the same time that a base realignment and closure was underway. So there was a lot of military construction and renovation going on at that time. And so we picked up the mission in 2008 and helped, since that time, have done over $1 billion worth of construction at Fort Jackson to help them really be up to date on how they receive, incoming recruits and give them their basic training experience. Those 50,000 incoming soldiers represent a little over 60% of all new recruits to the Army. The other 40% are done at one of two other bases. And so we've kind of grown with Fort Jackson as they've really embraced being that center of training. Fort Jackson also trains the chaplains across several services, and they also have the Army Drill Sergeant School there. So the support we provide to them is everything from when they come in as a new 18-year-old all the way through supplying them with the drill sergeants who are going to help them throughout their career, and on into the chaplains that may help them while they're in service. So that's kind of been our history and involvement there. And Brian, I'll see if you want to chime in with anything in your time you've been setting in the military chief slot.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, just a couple of more fun facts because the history of what Charleston District has done is so interesting to me that Fort Jackson, I think we said more than 45,000 basic trainees a year, also up to about 12,000 advanced trainees every year go through Fort Jackson. 50% of all the soldiers pass through Fort Jackson, but actually 60% of the women entering the Army every year. So that's great. And then something I found out relating to the speed with which, things worked way back when. 1,500 buildings were put up on Camp Jackson between June and December of 1917. So that's the year that it was established, and they built 1,500 buildings. We don't build quite with that speed anymore. We try and do it as quickly as we can. It's such a great mission for us to be involved in supporting our military, supporting the Army, those trainees, and ensuring that they have really top-notch facilities. And not only them, but also their families, their dependents. So the schools and everything that's on Fort Jackson, we just couldn't be happier to be a part of that.
Yeah, Brian mentioned the schools there. We recently completed construction of Pierce Terrace Elementary School. And one of the great things about the employees in the district, they put together this great STEM outreach event that while the new school was being constructed, they actually went up and spent the day with kindergarten, first, and second graders and did a whole thing about what the new school was going to look like, what types of things that the engineers and the people working on the new school building looked at and thought about as they were building the new school. They brought in little plans to let the kids, if they got to lay out the school the way they wanted to, how they could do that. But the biggest hit of the day was our construction folks brought in a bunch of tools and safety equipment. And there is nothing cuter than getting to see a little first grader in first grade hard hat and safety vest and safety glasses holding like a big giant wrench and talking about how excited they are to one day they want to be an engineer too. You talk about support to families and stuff at Fort Jackson. That's not just the parents and giving the kids a building to be in, but really talking to them about all the things that they can be when they grow up, and hopefully they'll study STEM and come to work for the Corps.
That's great. That must have been a lot of fun. And so, Lisa, you mentioned Charleston District being in the low country and talked about the wetlands and low-lying areas throughout the state. But Brian, wanted to hear a little bit from you about how Charleston District is involved with environmental regulations that surround business development in the state, particularly with those types of areas and environmentally sensitive resources around the state. So Brian, we'll turn it to you.
Yeah, the Low Country, if you've never been here, it really earns its name. It is tough to throw a rock and not hit something wet. So our regulators do a fantastic job of working within our regulations, within our laws, in trying to really balance the need of our commercial interest, our economic development, but also ensuring that there's no net loss of wetlands, and that we're really balancing those two things in trying to figure out how to make things work. And so some of the really large projects that our regulators work with, certainly transportation projects, so roads and bridges, but also those large manufacturing and transportation facilities. So we've got Boeing, which is, a really important economic driver, the Ports Authority and everything that they have going on, another huge economic driver, the Walmart's distribution centers, and I mean, there's probably, 50 to 100 things, Hale Gold Mine throughout the state that are really impactful. And I think really the Charleston District does a fantastic job in making sure that there is that balance in a state that has so many great resources.
When a lot of people think about our environmental regulatory program, obviously their first thought goes to filling wetlands or dealing with streams here on the coast, and that is a very big part of what we look at. But as I said earlier, we cover the entire state. As development is occurring, obviously we want no net loss of wetlands, but there's various stream impacts. We have to make sure that projects are not going to be, flooding their neighbors because of how they work the land and have stormwater runoff and things like that. But it also leads to some very interesting projects. One of the projects our regulators had to evaluate a permit for was for the Hale Gold Mine, actually in the Piedmont area up near Charlotte. It really afforded an opportunity to look at a lot of different things in the environment. And, a lot of us got to learn a whole lot about how gold mining used to be done and how it's done now, and looking at ways that the folks doing it were going to be able to protect the environment while still being able to do their development. So for every road or bridge that we do, somewhere out there's something different that our regulators have to look at and evaluate as well. And we're very proud to work, very well with the state of South Carolina and the Department of Commerce to make sure we are doing that balanced economic development.
Yeah, and one other thing, because of really linking to the Port of Charleston, that's how many things are always connected. And the Port of Charleston, with all the imports and exports that are coming through the various port terminals, we have a very big highway corridor leading from Charleston, I-26 to I-95 and I-85 and 75, all the highways. So there's also a lot of major business developments that come up in our area that we're looking at. So we've done projects for Google, Amazon, Walmart, Boeing, all sorts of car companies and car manufacturers. We're very heavily involved in the economic success of the state and the region. And just kind of, they say that, 1 in 11 jobs is linked to the port in South Carolina. And, you can say that a large part of that is due to, the work that we've done to balance those, economic developments with environmental sustainability and restoration. And one other note I wanted to just throw out, too, is, we appreciate, all of the public, too, for a long time, reaching out to the Corps and asking about what they can and can't do. And that's kind of always been a big thing around here, is because so many people live in or on water, whether it's, an actual stream or river or just a low-lying area, people tend to want to just be able to do whatever they want on their own property. when it comes to building things or filling things. But we have, very good program with the Corps that people contact us, and for many, many years, we send people out to take a look at things and talk to people in the community about, whether or not they would be impacting or need a permit or need to do any sort of, get any sort of permissions to do things. So we have a really good relationship with the community in that sense as well, not just with these big companies.
That is great. Having great public participation and public outreach is always a good thing. We mentioned how important Charleston Harbor is, and I imagine when weather gets to be tough in the area, it makes things a little more challenging. And so there's no shortage of hurricanes in the South Carolina area. And so, Lisa, can you talk about some of the efforts you all are doing to address the impacts of hurricanes and natural disasters?
Yes, Angela, happy to touch on that. As you mentioned, anytime that we have hurricanes, sometimes we have very powerful unnamed storms that do impact the area. Not only do we have a responsibility and a mission to respond immediately after disasters to help with recovery from those, but we also do long-term projects as well. In South Carolina, we do have what we call coastal storm risk management projects along the Myrtle Beach, the Grand Strand area, and also here locally at Folly Beach. We have two other beaches where we have not yet constructed projects but have done studies, and that's at Edisto and at Pawleys. And that's really looking at what can be done along the coast to help reduce the impacts from primarily erosion that occurs as part of those storms. But probably the biggest undertaking we have right now is the Charleston Peninsula study. And that's a study that we're in the feasibility phase of, that was directed by Congress for us to look at what can we do to protect this historic city from storm surge. We're celebrating our 150th, but the city of Charleston was celebrating their 350th this year. So a lot of history here to be protected. We already talked about the low country. I think the highest elevation in downtown Charleston, I think, is elevation 14 or 15. We're looking at a variety of things that we can be done. One of the biggest things we're looking at now is some type of protective wall around a large part of the city to keep that water out, but trying to balance that with the not impacting the historical buildings and being able to construct it in the type of environment we have here is a challenge. And so we have a team that's actually comprised of people from across the Corps helping us look at that. We'll be putting out an environmental impact statement about that about 8 months from now. So we're always looking at those things. And, hurricane response and recovery is something we're very active in as well with FEMA and South Carolina Emergency Management Department.
A couple of years ago, we, like Lisa said, it's not always hurricanes, like hitting Charleston as the models will always project, but, sometimes it's just as everything is very connected through the waterways in South Carolina. A couple of years ago, we worked with those partners that Lisa was talking about with after Hurricane Florence, because, it was a hurricane that didn't hit our area directly or anything like that, but that was a very unique storm, and there was a lot of rain and runoff that flowed throughout the state, from the upstate all the way down to the coast. And, it's a great example of partnership to figure out, the ways to come up with solutions, with working with DOT and the National Guard and all sorts of different organizations to figure out what it is that we do. And it's just a very important part that we don't like being a part of, unfortunately, but unfortunately we have to be and are proud of the work that we do, but wish, obviously we didn't have these storms we had to deal with, but we're an organization that's always been prepared for them when we need them.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that example. As we're talking today about the 150th anniversary of the Charleston District, and so we talked a lot about the past, but we want to talk some about the future. So Lisa and Brian, what are some of the big projects that you all are working on that we can look to see from Charleston District going forward?
Wow. How long is the podcast? We could talk for a long time about this. I mentioned the Charleston Peninsula study, and that's probably going to be our next really huge project that we would undertake. It's over $1 billion is currently the alternatives that we're looking at. The current deepening, just to give some perspective, we're deepening the harbor by 7 feet and spending about $500 million to do that. So a really big undertaking coming there. Obviously, looking at when do we need to renourish the federal beaches that we have here to provide protection to infrastructure and roadways and things like that. Those are always out there on the horizon, again, very dependent upon storms. We do a lot of what would be a lot of people would consider smaller projects that are under $10 million to help address flooding across the state. As Sean mentioned, from Hurricane Florence, there are a lot of folks that are wanting to reevaluate their flooding risk now that they've seen what can happen when we get a lot of rain concentrated in one area and flowing down into a relatively flat landscape. On the military side of the house, I'll let Brian talk a little bit about what we're looking at up at Fort Jackson. But a lot of our portfolio, we're assisting our federal partners in whatever they need, whether that's the VA in Columbia. We're on deck to help them construct 4 different projects over the next 2 years, to working with our regional folks like the 81st Readiness Division of the Army Reserves, and helping them ensure that all of their buildings are well cared for and are ready for people to train in them at a moment's notice. But we've got a couple good projects in the hopper. Brian, if you want to give some specifics on those.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, we've got a couple of military construction projects we're looking forward to in the next couple of years, starting and completing in Fort Jackson. Barracks, those facilities that help with in processing all of those great trainees that come through the doors of Fort Jackson. And then, just continuing to provide that problem-solving value to the nation that Charleston District has done for 150 years, to our sponsors, our customers, our stakeholders, the public, in any way, shape, and form that we can, is really, I think, what all of the employees are looking forward to. Just what's that next challenge? How do we do it the best way Charleston can, and move forward to the next thing?
And yeah, if I could tag on that just a little bit, we're talking about the district being around for 150 years, and actually even a little longer than that. But one of the things that's really been the cornerstone of success of the district is the employees and how they partner with all parties, whether that is, as Brian mentioned, is stakeholders, our partners on projects, or the general public, and having that real sense of transparency and communication, and knowing that we live in these same communities where we're doing projects, and so the success of the project is important to our employees as a resident of the area as it is as an employee. And I think as we look at what are we going to be doing over the next 150 years, it's probably going to continue to be a lot of the same things we did for the last 150 years. We're going to take on the missions that Congress and administration ask us to. We're going to support the folks of the state of South Carolina, and we're going to do that whether it's a nice, big, shiny, brand new, $40 million barracks, or it's a $10,000 dock renovation to assist the National Park Service so that folks can come see the history at Fort Sumter, and everything in between. For us, it's not about how many buildings can we put our nice shiny logo on, but it's doing the work that helps other people be able to accomplish their mission and be able to succeed. So when we talk about what is that history of Charleston looking like, that's what I see it as being. And time will tell whether that's nice big 10-story building or a 4-story building or a big wall around Charleston or whatever that is. But I think the legacy of the district is, when called upon, did we deliver, and did we deliver in a fashion that the public deserves? Because at the end of the day, that's who pays our salary, and that's what we want to do.
Thank you for that. So we're nearing the end of our time together, but I do want to talk about the celebration. Having been a district myself, I know that it's a really big deal. The districts go all out and try to celebrate it because it means a lot to the employees to understand the history and celebrate where they came from. Let's talk about the 150th birthday celebration. I know that given the pandemic, you guys probably had to alter some things. So what are some of the things you all are doing to help celebrate?
Well, you are right. Unfortunately, COVID has decided that they wanted an invitation to our 150th party, so we have had to change some things up. As Sean mentioned earlier, we're going to kick off a lot of our activities starting in March. They will culminate with our change of command in mid-July. We're doing a variety of things. We are going to have a time capsule that we're going to open up and allow employees and leadership to put some things in there that 25 and 50 years from now, our successors will look at and say, "Oh my, that's a crazy kind of thing to look at." Sort of similar to what we do when we uncover interesting plans or documents. And we're going to kick that off later this month. We're doing a business open house. We're doing it virtually, unfortunately, instead of in person, with contractors that are interested in doing business with us and really talking to them about the district and letting them come and talk to us about their capabilities. We will have our Wounded Warrior and Veterans fishing event later this month up at our Cooper River Rediversion Project to really celebrate our history of supporting our veterans throughout time. And then we're going to do a variety of outreach type things, again, both virtually and some in person. And we are hoping that in July, just prior to our change of command, that we're going to be able to actually have what we're calling the birthday gala, where we're inviting past commanders, past DPMs, our retirees, all of our employees, our partners and stakeholders that we work with, to come back and have some cake and to tell some stories about what it was like when they were in the district or when they were here before, and to really just let everybody enjoy looking back at what it is that we've done since we first set up that official office here in 1871. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of fun outreach events that we will adapt as needed to, depending on how the pandemic continues.
Yeah, and for anybody listening to this podcast, you can check out our special website we created for our birthday, which has all of our history on it. You can go to www.sac.usace.army.mil/150, and on there we have a whole history of our district with a lot of highlights with some old historical photos, dates, major events that have happened, that kind of thing. On there also there is a section for outreach and public events, if those are allowed to happen. Unfortunately, that list has already been shrunk in the last few weeks as things have continued to be canceled that we were going to be a part of. Things allow, we do have a number of interesting events for the public that you'll be able to participate in and come see. And, I think that a lot of these things that we were planning on doing, if they don't happen during our official 150th anniversary celebration, we can bring those back once everything is cleared up. We were originally planning on celebrating our birthday starting 6 months before the birthday and ending with the birthday here in March. And now we've kind of started, we changed, pivoted last year to start it in March and go for 6 months. And obviously, things haven't completely changed and cleared up. So we're just kind of rolling with that. And all of these things, they will eventually happen some shape or form. But for now, like I said, go to our website and, check out our 150th anniversary page and get some really cool insights into the history of the district and see what we're doing.
Thank you for that, Sean. We'll definitely check it out. And want to thank you, Sean, Lisa, and Brian for joining us today for this edition of Inside the Castle. We appreciate you and your insights. To our listeners, we want to hear from you. What topics are important to you and people you are interested in hearing from? Until next time, be safe, be innovative, and be revolutionary.
To provide your feedback, email us at cw.infrastructure.team@usace.army.mil. Stay tuned for additional Inside the Castle podcasts as we explore life inside the Corps and revolutionize civil works together.